Hello everyone, and welcome back to another episode to the Rise and Fall series. I'm actually going to start off today by clearing some things up before we begin with today's topic of discussion. These videos in no way mean these characters that I cover on this series are not viable within any endgame content such as Chaos and Lufenia. We here are simply defining great moments for these characters, as well as looking back at some moments for them that maybe could have been a little better, hence why this series is called the Rise and Fall. Now with that being said, let's take a whirl into today's characters as we go over his highlights as he spirals down into the DFFOO universe. Let's go over the rise and fall of Final Fantasy XII's main protagonist, Vaan. So let's start off at Vaan's beginning. He first was released during the times of Arc 1 Chapter 2, within the main storyline. His 15 CP was, which at the day, okay I suppose, gave Vaan more damage on his S1 and extended the duration of his attack up buff. But Vaan had a very interesting niche within his skills. After using them up to the point where you had one left, it will change, granting Vaan a follow-up attack. And Red Spiral now followed up with an attack called Whiteout, an ice elemental attack that did 5 break hits into a single HP attack. This honestly was pretty cool. The only downside was it could only be used at the end, but I guess it worked out since at least you know your final skill use, your damage would increase considering the following attack. I will also mention here that during the beginning portions of the game, there was characters released with their ruled evolution weapons, and Vaan was no exception. He was granted the weapon called the Lila Edge, and this weapon honestly is extremely good for him. If you don't have it for Vaan, I definitely recommend getting it. As by now in the game, we have the weapon shop, and it only costs 10 red tokens, and this weapon gave Vaan an invisible buff for 5 turns after he broke a target, granting him max brave and attack by 20%. Important to note that this buff is invisible, meaning it cannot be dispelled by enemies at all. Moving just a tad bit ahead, and we get to the release of Ash's LC, which gave Vaan his 35 CP, which increased the potency of his S2 ability White Whirl, which I might add also had a follow-up attack on its final skill usage would grant the follow-up attack Luminescence. This was a 5 brave hit plus HP attack that also inflicted blind, which if you like testing your luck out in this game, then the debuff blind sure will give you some butt-clenching heart attacks. During this early time in the game, however, Vaan was actually really good, especially as a front unit. Bring in Vaan just to unload on a single target and watch their HP just drop. Just wish he wasn't such a glass cannon, meaning after his skills were used up, he was just kind of there. I'm not gonna sugarcoat it for you guys, his brave and HP attacks at this time were pretty bad. Moving ahead now to the release of his EX weapon debut called Demon's Bane. This didn't really give Vaan much, but it did of course give him a new HP dump by his EX ability called Pyroclasm. The only good thing besides its many hits was that its recharge rate would actually charge pretty quickly, so you'd always have it ready to go most of the time. The bad part about it is that it was classed as fire damage, and we'll talk about why that's bad a little later. At this point though, Vaan was a solid magical DPS unit, since everyone being released with their EX was honestly. It was the latest trend to have, regardless of who even received one. This however is when things started to change for our Sky Pirate, as a new global exclusive will single-handedly throw Vaan over a cliff, and her name was Beatrix. Beatrix was everyone's waifu, even to those who never heard about her until her debut in the game. Beatrix was a monster of a DPS unit, and her damage was honestly unmatched by any other magical DPS unit that we had during this time. The only thing I'd say Vaan had over Beatrix was Vaan had high single target damage, where Beatrix was more AoE heavy, especially with her EX ability Clem Hazard. Vaan unfortunately fell to the wayside at this point, and it didn't get much better for our Sky Pirate since more magical units were on the rise. With Renoa and Golbez now out in the game, Vaan just couldn't stand up to these new and powerful magical units. Vaan sadly having low skill usage and only being single target, he didn't fare very well. I will note here though that he still did really good as a friend unit to help you burn down a single target quickly when needed. And now we've arrived to his EX Plus realization, which came with the debut of Bosch's banner. I'm sure you're wondering too, but Riley, what about his rework? Don't worry, we'll get there. Everything that he received with his EX Plus was, well, good. Nothing bad, but nothing crazy either. Now let's go ahead and talk about the rework that he received. Both skills get 6 uses in total, and potency increases. He also gets 120% overflow in his first skill, while his second skill receives 150% overflow. Both skills now refund Brave based on damage dealt, and skill 2 now grants max Brave up. Both skills also gets further upgrades after 5 casts, which means you have 1 use left, with more overflow and damage and brave refund. Whew, that was a lot, but don't worry, his EX Plus realization is pretty short. At 1 out of 3, he gets 20% max brave and attack, while at 2 out of 3, he starts now the quests with 6 turns of Flight to Freedom, which also, his Pyroclasm EX ability will now grant Vaan this buff, but grants him 8 turns of it. At 3 out of 3, Vaan gets 8 brave hits with Pyroclasm, however if Flight to Freedom is active, which honestly should always be active if you're playing Vaan, this ability changes to a ++ variant, which grants an additional 2 hits and increases the brave potency as well as grants additional overflow. I'll also say that this lowers his action delay by 6, but I don't really know what that means, so we're just going to pretend it's not there. This EX Plus for him honestly really pushed Vaan as a single target monster, basically guaranteeing that whatever Vaan will target, he will melt, and that was a guarantee. Unfortunately though, even with all these changes, Vaan still had low skill usage and his glass cannon status really didn't change, and therefore, he worked better as your friend unit to help burn down the enemy, versus bringing him on your team. As a side note here, Vaan got a better HP and brave attack, so that helped him. Not by much though. Fast forward now, and we are now at the release of the Burst and LD weapons, to which Vaan got his BT and LD with the debut of the new character Gabron in Arc 2 Chapter 10. Vaan receiving this more notable his LD was a godsend for him. His LD weapon granted Vaan 3 skill usage with his new ability called Mist, 2 though if you don't have it fully max limit broken. This allowed Vaan to not be such a glass cannon anymore, and actually made him a viable magical DPS unit who can handle wave after wave without using so many of his skills anymore. Finally, Vaan was actually prominent within his role as well as within his niche. His burst effect was, well, nice. It's not bad by any means, just kind of interesting for him of all characters to receive this kind of burst effect. But I'm sure the devs had their reasons. His burst aura actually prevents Vaan and his party members from getting below a certain amount of brave, which is fun to use when you have a specific team comp of characters, such like Prompto, Garland, or even Null, just to name a few, who HP dumps a lot during their HP attacks. I also like to give credit to the Tonberry troop right now, since if you read their infographics, which I highly recommend you do, they actually provide a very interesting way to use Vaan, and that is if the boss absorbs Wind, Vaan actually turns into a delayer, since the target will absorb the first attack of White Whirl. However, Vaan then follows up with his other attack, Luminescence, and therefore will break the target and give you a free turn of delay. That's honestly really cool if you think about it. Though the part where we get to the end of the road to our Sky Pirate friend, or you can say to the landing strip in our airship, is that his kit is way too element heavy. Vaan has 4 elements in his kit, which can really hurt him. Although like I explained earlier, and I will note now, that fire and wind doesn't really bother Vaan, as you'll honestly for one never really use his EX ability. Couple his elemental weakness along with the new units that have come out since the BT-LD era, for which I'll give you an example. If you are playing Global right now, Arden has just been released. Have you noticed that there really hasn't been any talk about Vaan? Especially with Noctis now around with his BT and LD. Crazy when you think about it, that he fell shortly after his arrival, but this is the new trend in DFFOO. New BT and LD banners come out really often, and the previous BT and LD banner are just old news. I will, however, end you all with this. Vaan is definitely the #1 magical DPS unit to have for a single target boss, even 2 in my opinion. He can melt down literally anything you want him to, and our Sky Pirate friend does it very well. And there you have it, guys. Thank you so much for sitting down and joining me in this conversation. I really appreciate it. Honestly, it was really hard for me to find earlier footage of Vaan, not because there isn't any, it's just because most of it was just him coming out as a friend unit versus him being on the actual team. And now, I want to get to a special announcement. I've received over 100 subscribers, and it's all been because of this series, so honestly guys, thank you from the bottom of my heart, really. And I really want to show my gratitude to all of you for supporting me in this endeavor, so I'm going to do a special giveaway. Simply like this video, leave a comment on who you want me to do next, as well as joining my Discord with Soul. That way I can go ahead and directly message the winner for either a $50 iTunes or Google Play Store gift card. And by the way, if I happen to reach 200 subscribers before the end of this month, I'll actually double that. So that means one lucky person can win a $100 gift card for either Apple or Google Play Store. And with that being said, I hope you enjoyed the video. And as always guys, I'll see you next time.